Congratulations, you made it to the Exfil. You can close Reddit, relax, unpack your bags, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hey there, Mike, aka MTB Trigger here, and with me as always is my co-host Ronal, aka Eric. If you are brand new, welcome. This is an Escape from Tarkov podcast where we talk about all things EFT, and our goal is to get better at the game, and we hope you come along with us on that journey. A ton, I repeat, a ton, or a thick amount of things happened today in Tarkov. So we're going to jump straight into hideout keeping so that we can talk about all of these changes. So first, guys, the best way you can support the show, and there's a number of them, but the best way is to share the show with a friend. In the last 24 hours, we've had 14 new people to the Exfil Discord. So there's a lot of people sharing the show. There's new people finding the show, joining the community. It's awesome. It's amazing. It's the absolute best thing you can do to support the podcast and to support the community. Second to that is liking, commenting, rating on your app or on YouTube. Any engagement with us, or if you like something we're doing or you think we can do it better, let us know. But all of that really helps us when it's on those apps or on YouTube. And then lastly, we have the direct support option via Patreon for those of you that are looking for a direct way to support the podcast. And to our current patrons, thank you so much for those of you that donate your hard-earned money to help us on this little hobby of ours to pump this content out. So the only thing that I really wanted to announce and talk about is something that many of you have already found and discovered and have been commenting on, but I put out a few factory guides on the Exfil YouTube channel, and I put out a guide of my 2 favorite spots, and I explained all of the different areas and things to look out for in an offline raid, to showing you the 2 areas I like to hold and why. And then I've released the first video of me breaking down my own gameplay at one of those locations, talking about the things I did well, the things I noticed, the things I didn't notice, and then the things that I could have improved on in that raid. So it's a longer form YouTube video, but I love Factory, and a lot of people have reached out asking me for those videos, so they're now up there, and we'll have those links in the show notes, but they're up on the YouTube channel now, and that's youtube.com/XPMedianow. So outside of that, if you're looking to get in touch with me, the best place to chat with me is either on Discord or when I'm live on Twitch, and I do stream a few days a week on Twitch starting about 1 p.m. Central, and that's at MTB Trigger. MTB Trigger on basically everything: Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and of course in Discord. So that's enough about me. Ronald, how are you, man? Let these fine folks know how they can get in touch with you, sir.
Hey, what's up, everybody? You can always get a hold of me in Discord, send me a DM. We're talking to people all day long on there, and really excited to engage with the community. It's been great seeing lots of new faces in the Exfil Discord, as Trigger mentioned, and it's been fun to talk and get to know some of you pretty well. So you can always hit me up there on Discord, Ronald at the top of the list next to MTB Trigger. Other than that, if you have something non-Tarkov related that you'd like to get to us, you can formally email the show at xpmedia2020@gmail.com. And this week, I just have one announcement as a follow-up to the how to get more FPS out of your computer video that I made on YouTube. If you haven't seen that already and you'd like to do some performance tuning on your PC, definitely go through it. It's got timestamps in it for different various things that you can do to just double check, make sure your settings are optimized. But there's one question I've been asked enough, and by enough, I mean like at least 30 times. So I'm going to answer it right now. And that question has to do with, if I have an AMD Ryzen processor and I do not have the high performance power profile that you say in the video, which I did say in the video, what do? I only have the balanced mode power profile. Can I use that? And I just want to throw that out there right now that say that yes, you can use that. It's not going to decrease your performance in Tarkov, It just changes the way that your processor, how much power it uses when it's idle. And so it doesn't change your performance in Tarkov. It just changes how much power it uses when it's idle. Something that if you don't have the high performance option for whatever reason, go ahead, click balance, you'd be good to go, and you can keep going on from there. So I want to follow up with that for all the people that I'm sending me that question. If you haven't asked that question and you're about to, now you know the answer to it. But moving on to this week, it's been an interesting week in Tarkov with the Drops event and then all the crazy things that have happened in the last 24 hours. There's definitely lots to talk about this week, but how's your week been, Trigger?
My week's been really good. I had a bunch of cool things happen. And I think the number one thing for me was I got to spend some time playing with a friend of mine who actually got me into PUBG and was one of the original people telling me that I needed to get into Tarkov. And I denied. And they got into it like a year and a half ago, and then they got out of it after just a couple weeks, which is why I ultimately didn't pick up the game back then. And then they just recently got back into it. So I got to spend some time playing with them. They're level 5 when I first started playing. They were on the standard edition of the game, and they were on the golden pocket watch. And, you know, they hadn't started listening to the podcast yet, which I gave them a tremendous amount of crap for, since we talk about all those struggles very early on in the first couple episodes. But I got to actually go through and help with tasks like delivery from the past and golden pocket watch. And you know, there's something special about this game in that, you know, this game is so hard and it's got so many things about it that when you're new you just don't get. And having to go through and explain what all of the inventory things are and helping them know what to sell and doing it in this wipe. You know, I did it a lot last wipe, but this wipe I've been focused on playing. And I haven't done a lot of Sherpaing. I haven't been raiding with a lot of people that I don't know or new people. I've kind of been playing solo. And this was really my, you know, outside of playing with Ronal some and J-Mac, who I play regularly with, and Dadcaster a little bit, I hadn't really played with anybody new. And so it was a really fresh experience, like going through with someone who's brand new and like this. You know, the golden pocket watch, like we all say it, like it sucks for us. You know, imagine the person that's just trying it out for the first time in this wipe. And it was just like, I get it, man. I don't know exactly how you're feeling right now, but I know the frustration. And so it's awesome, man. Like cleaning up the inventory, working through those early tasks, bringing them in a couple shotguns and just helping them get over those early hurdles. And at the end of it, like we went from level 5 to level 8 the first night we played, and then we played again a few days later. But it was that moment of a level 8 player telling me like, dude, I am so hooked on this game and I don't know anything that's going on. And it's just, I remember that feeling. I still have it. There's still so much depth that I want and get out of this game. And, you know, I'm sitting here talking about this, realizing that we're going to get into some of these philosophical questions tonight. And it's sort of giving me a little bit of joy to know that somebody brand new, really, they are new. They got into it, got out of it, and they're back. And they are hooked. They found something they love about this game. But that was really most of my week. You know, I got to level 39, but the most impactful moments for me were working through some early struggles with somebody who's new to the game.
Yeah, that's awesome because we all were there. And, you know, to a large degree, I think a lot of people are still there, including myself. There's lots of things that you learn as you just push through it. And we're doing it, you know, for the second time this wipe. But yeah, that's great. I mean, I think helping someone, helping a friend with tasks and quests, I mean, this is the game where you have to get help, really. Picking it up cold is really, really, I don't think it's really designed for that. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, the funniest part is the reason that he reached out initially was because his stash was full and he didn't want to reach out. But he's like, I literally don't know what to do. Because like every single space, every bag, every tack rig, it was all full of everything from super rare stuff, right? Like you just forget like the RNG of the early game. Like he had a found and raid factory key, a found and raid like West 104 key, like things that once he hits level 10 are going to be exceptionally valuable to him. And I'm looking at his inventory and I'm like, how do you have an OFZ found and raid? Like it's like stuff that I need, and he's just like managed to get. So it's just a really cool experience when you get to really sit down with someone who's brand new and wants to learn or is forced to learn because their inventory's full.
Yeah, there's nothing like having no squares left to force a little bit of Tarkov progression, whether you want
Exactly.
it or not.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, I had a pretty good week. I took a couple days off. Shout out to all the dads in the Exfil community for Father's Day weekend. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, if that's your current situation. But before that, we had the Drops event, which happened for a couple of days, right? Last week into this week. And I actually, for the first time ever, got lucky with the Drops event. Most of the time I get a splint because that's Geeks' way of making sure that Nikita doesn't give me anything because he's mad that I'm right about the game. But this time around, I did kind of well during the weekend, and I got 2 intelligence folders and an SSD drive, which for
Wow.
me is super timely because I'm going for that intelligence center upgrade. So I was gonna have to buy 3 of them anyways. So that actually really helped the cause. So I was pretty happy to see that kind of come through. And I'm once again leveling strength. And so last time around, if you remember listening a few episodes back, I forget which episode number it is, but it's somewhere in the early teens. I was leveling strength right after they reset all the strength skills, and I was at like 2.7, and they reset it back to 0, and then I needed it like the next week. And I had to level strength by walking around Shoreline with overburdened bags. And I decided this time around that I can afford it, so I'm just going to throw a bunch of grenades. So I'm having fun on Shoreline. I find a spot at night. I take in a full tack rig and a full bucket full of grenades, and I throw them all until I get diminishing returns. Then I chuck both of those into the deep dark hole somewhere where no one can find them, and then I go try to do a 0 to hero run. And it's a lot of fun. I Out of 4 attempts, I've only made it out once. But the one time that I did make it out, it was actually one of the most fun things I've done in Tarkov because I didn't care if I lived or died. And I ended up running through the map like a crazy person, picking up a bunch of stuff. And first I found a gun, then I found some armor, and then I found a bag. And all of that just made the game super fun. So if you have to level strength like me, it might be a fun way to just relax. Like I found it relaxing. I still do find it relaxing. I'm not quite done yet. And if you're on Shoreline and all of a sudden you see a bunch of flash grenades and a bunch of smoke grenades go off, just avoid my little corner of the map.
That's awesome. It's funny because I actually just started doing like true 0 to hero runs recently. And you guys are going to think I'm nuts, man. You're going to think I'm crazy, but my favorite place right now to 0 to hero is woods with a Mosin. And I'll take like 10 bullets on the Mosin and then summon my Gamma. And I will literally just sprint around like a crazy person with no headset, nothing, just the Mosin. Right? And I mean, you could pistol run 0 to hero and all that, but I actually did it right before we started recording tonight. And I mean, I'm just laughing. I'm giggling to myself because I'm just running around, just like messing around with people. And I think there's something to that when you can eliminate the downside or at least reduce it significantly. And it's kind of like why scavving is so fun, right? Because it's like, well, if I die, I die. I don't lose anything. And so 0 to hero is kind of the same way, but there's that difference in it that if you get it or you find something really good, you get to keep it in your Gamma, or you just go on. So like if you've never actually tried a 0 to hero run, I highly recommend it because it's one of my favorite things to do. And I started doing it to learn maps. That's when I really started doing it. And now I just go, I'm like, ugh, I need to just unwind. So I'm going to go run woods on a 0 to hero Mo's and run.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I never really did the hatchet running or the pistol running last wipe. I just never did it. And this wipe, because of the way the game was changed, it actually, ironically enough, forced me into doing that. And so I've done quite a bit of pistol running and not so much hatchet running, but pistol running. And it is interesting. I actually kind of enjoy it. I find it to be kind of relaxing because I'm not worried if I die. I just think that's just takes a little bit of the stress out of it. But you can also do silly things with it too, which, kind of makes it fun. And speaking of silly things, my factory gear farm where I'm playing the game wrong, I realize I'm playing the game wrong. So everybody who listened to last week's episode, if you have feedback for me, I'm definitely playing the game wrong, and I get that and accept it. So here's what I'm doing if you haven't heard. I'm taking a scav on factory and I'm hiding until there's about 4 minutes and 20 seconds left, 4 minutes, 30 seconds left, somewhere in there. And I'm then working my way up to the office slowly and quietly. And now there's two things. I either have the camera door exfil, which is in the tunnels, which is right underneath the office. You come down and go right down the steps there, and then you can run right to that. Or I have the office window extract. And so I walk up into the office area in the hallway, and all I do is scoop up loot. I scoop up what's left. So it's I usually end up with a couple of scav backpack exceptions, a couple of tack rigs. I'm always full on guns. I always find a pistol, and I usually find a class 3 armor. And usually a helmet of some kind. And then I just scoop that all up and then work my way out. And sometimes I find somebody who has a backpack full of whatever they were emptying in the file cabinets or in the safe or whatever that they didn't gamma, right? And so there's a backpack full of that. That's happened a few times, and I just scoop that up and head down. And so I either extract through the office with like 15 seconds left in the raid, or I run back down the steps and extract at the camera door exit. And I usually get 0 kills. I don't even shoot at anybody. And this is just about making money, making currency for in-game. And this strategy has netted me in the past like 5 days of playing like over 10 million rubles. And it's just crazy. It's like printing currency because I sell everything, and because I make it out, it's all found in raid, and I sell everything. And so what I've started to do is whatever armor I find, I sell. I don't use. If it's found in raid, I sell it. And then I keep stuff and I use on my PMC stuff that's not found in raid, stuff that I can't sell. So if I have helmets or whatever, all that stuff I just sell if I can. And it's gotten my liquid currency back up to where I need it to be to push the hideout, which is expensive, as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pushing the hideout using that to kind of fund my hideout progression. Now, again, I'm not playing the game right, so I get it, but it's an interesting strategy that kind of developed out of frustration for not having enough rubles to push the hideout as fast as I wanted to. Didn't mean that I couldn't do it. It just meant that I couldn't do it as fast as I wanted to do it. And so I solved it this way. So it's kind of interesting, and it has been pretty profitable for the last couple of days.
I don't know, man. Have people said you're not doing it right? Because I just see the scavving, like you're actually taking it seriously and surviving, and you've got a high percentage success rate. So I don't know, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And it's funny because the question that came in my mind was, have you tried doing this on your PMC? Have you tried it with having the gamma available with nothing in the gamma? Or is it the randomness of the scav spawn location that makes it super successful? Because, there's part of me that's like, oh, maybe I should do this while I'm editing. Join a factory raid, hide, and set a timer like Geek said, and just go scoop loot at the end of it. And if I die, I die, whatever.
I think that the randomness of the spawn location of the scav plays into this strategy. I think that with a PMC initially in factory, you're going to be clearing spawn points. That's kind of like the standard operating procedure for factory is spawn in, clear spawn points, then set up your farm, whatever you're going to do. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm taking advantage of the fact that the PMCs are already set up doing whatever they're going to do. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that most people play factory to set up to farm the office area. They farm a gate 3 extract. So that's basically where most people set up to farm, and I take full advantage of that. There's 2 places that I found in factory that I can basically sit and I could AFK and I wouldn't get shot. Nobody ever goes there. And so I hide in one of those 2 places, and maybe we'll make a strategy video out of all this because it is kind of a weird thing to do.
I think it would be a cool like companion piece to the XP farm on factory, right? Because it's like the opposite end of that. Like, here's how you go kill scavs, and here's a way to profit from somebody who was killing scavs. It's great because I mean you could do both, and I'm sitting here thinking like, there's times where I would do this when I'm doing other stuff, and if once every 17 minutes I go in and scoop loot and run out, fine. I don't know. I think it's cool.
Yeah, and the key is to make this work is to wait until under 5 minutes and then start doing directional listening. So you're crouching, you're slow walking and crouching, and you're changing directions without making the screeching noise. You're not moving in place, you're kind of walking, and you're listening, for all the PMCs run to the Exfil, and you can hear them on factory. That's the nice thing about factories. You can pretty much hear everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And especially after a while, if you get good with sound at factory, if you're in the tunnels and you hear the metal banging sound, they're running across the grates towards gate 3 with that much time left. If you're behind the connexes where I like to hide, staring at the metal grates that go either up into the office or down into the camera door exit, you can hear them running across those same grates, but they're coming from your right side. So it's kind of one of those situations that once you get the sound down, you can tell when the PMCs are gone. And because you're a scav, the scavs aren't going to shoot at you. So then you just have free reign. The only thing you have to watch out for is player scavs. And I have run into player scavs camping the office. And here's a tip for this. You can hear player scav because they're going into the file cabinets. And as you're creeping up the steps, you can hear the file cabinet drawers go in and out, in and out, in and out. And if you hear that, you know that you have a player scav in the office, most likely. And so I just keep creeping up the steps, and you have a choice. If my exfil is the camera bunker door, I don't even go into the office. I just scoop up what's in the stairwell. And if I don't have enough, then I'll run back down into the middle of factory and just find a couple dead scavs and then make my way back down the tunnel, or I'll just run down to the exfil in the tunnel. If I do have the office extract as my extract, then what I have to do is battle the scav that's in there. And most people leave one door open and one door closed. And so what I've found with factory is I walk to the other door and I open it, and then I move back to the door that was already open. I prone, shoot out their legs, and exfil, because everyone's covering the door that you just opened thinking that you're going to come in that way. That strategy works 9 out of 10 times. And exfil, and then you're done. So, and remember, scavs don't have really any armor at all. And depending on what kind of guns you found on all the people in the stairwell, and there always are people in the stairwell, you can find something on the way up, and one shotgun blast and the scav's dead. So it really does work well, and it's very situational. And one of the things I really like about it is it's taught me how to use different things because it's so situational. So it puts you in a situation, or puts you in an environment where you're going to have to do some kind of fighting to get out. So you literally have to use whatever is there. So you're not using your PMC loadout. You're learning about all this other stuff, whatever you find to use, the goods and the bads and things like that. And so for me, I've really enjoyed that part of it. I think it's honestly made me better at just regular PMC rating.
That's awesome. I love factory just in general, but I think the thing that actually jumps out to me the most about what you were just saying is that you're learning things about player behavior on that map that I have learned from the complete other way of playing those areas, right? Because I go in for PvP, and and again, you're on your scav. I know that you play it differently on your PMC. Like, this is actually kind of an aside, but I was thinking about this today. When I walk my dog, I usually spend 30 minutes thinking about Tarkov in the morning, and I I was thinking about the rat and the Chad, and I'm gonna add a new one in because some people, there's the beaver, which is geeks say, and whatever, right? He's the beaver, and there's some people that talk about being the honey badger. And I think that your playstyle, I think you're the snapping turtle. Okay, you kind of, you protect the loot that you get. You move around methodically, but if somebody messes up and comes into your area, like you're done. You're done. If they come up behind you, they have a chance, right? You have to hold the back end of the snapping turtle. He's going to get you. But if the snapping turtle comes at you from the front, like you're going to get wrecked. So I think you're the snapping turtle. I don't know if you like that or not, but that's what I was thinking about this morning.
I like it. I think we can work with that. We can work with the Exfil snapping turtle.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that may be a better fit, but I was laughing to myself this morning, and it may have to do with some videos I saw on YouTube that were snapping turtles getting people's hands that they thought were out of the way. But
I think what's really interesting is how the strategies for learning factory can be so different.
right. And that was really all I wanted to point out. To your point, it's you're learning the exact same thing about the office that I learned through PvPing there. And it doesn't matter whether it's a scav, a player scav, a PMC, like that's what happens in the office. And that strategy works no matter what you're doing on your end. Because players think the same way. Like if there's a Chad running around the office on a scav, they're gonna act the same way. They're gonna play the same way. So that's really cool, man.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that you can learn different ways. You can get the same result, right? You can have success, but doing it totally different ways. And as I was watching your PvP video on YouTube on XP Media, which is very good, by the way, if you haven't seen that, I highly suggest you go check it out because Trigger does this methodical breakdown of all these different angles and things for farming scabs and farming XP, and it's really, really done well. As I was watching that, I was thinking to myself, man, some of those situations that you were in really make me uncomfortable thinking about. And so I kind of laughed because we're kind of achieving somewhat of the same knowledge level through different ways of doing it. Now, the difference is you're doing it on a PMC, so you're getting XP along with it, along with the loot and everything like that. But I could do this strategy on a PMC2 to your point earlier. But I guess my point is that you can still get good at PvP, good at gunplay, good at hearing, good at all those different aspects of Tarkov, in a totally, from coming at it from a totally different perspective. And I just think that's cool that the game is set up in a way that lets you do that.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because there are so many times where I'll kill, 15 to 20 scavs on factory. And by that point, there's like 2 or 3 minutes left in the raid, and I'm sitting there trying to maximize the value I'm getting out of every slot. And the keyword there is maximize because I'm leaving a tremendous amount of mid-tier loot, armor, guns, ammo, everywhere. And then furthermore, I usually don't loot every scav that I kill. Maybe they're in too much of a threatening area where I don't know what's gone on over there, but I'll leave scavs that I never touched. And there's sometimes where I'll have to exfil because a player scav hits me in the head and causes me to have a concussion or whatever, or they bleed me up and I got to run and get out and I've already got some stuff in my bag, so I just leave. But there's times when I've probably left just boatloads of loot. So when you were saying like we achieved the same thing and you were talking about the PvP knowledge and gun skills, I'm like, no, you kind of achieved the same thing on a loot basis too. Yeah, there's an XP difference, because I like to PvP and play my PMC on factory, but that's not everybody's jam. But if you like to scav, it's a legit strategy for making money, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's been pretty good. And with the change in the find and raid status, especially along the lines of the drops event, which is fun, right? I got some stuff I can use for my hideout progression, but you can't sell any of it on the flea market. You could sell it to traders, I guess.
Sure.
But with not being able to play the flea market or do arbitrage or things like that because of what they did to the game, there are a lot of things they've taken away from making money. So this is one way that is the result of me having to play differently to make money. So it's interesting. It's
Right.
developed in a way that I wouldn't have expected. So that's why I think
Yeah.
it's cool.
That's really cool. Well, as much as I would just talk about Factory forever, I don't think that's everybody's everybody's jam. And we got a lot to get to. We completely scrapped what we were originally going to talk about on this episode because today, at the day we're recording this, not even 8 hours ago, some big things happened. Some big things changed. Battlestate made some changes to the game, and over the last week, during this drops event that had so much hype on Twitch, there's been a number of changes that have gone on. We've learned the focus from Battlestate, I would say, on what they're doing right now, at least part of their focus, and we really want to talk about this. And if you were hanging around on the 22nd of June, which is when we're recording this, we actually hung out in Discord for actually almost an hour. We told ourselves it was going to be 20 minutes, but it was close to an hour, just talking with a bunch of people about what they thought about the changes on ammo, the task changes, the real money trading, which is what Battlestate's talked about recently, and just how it's affecting their gameplay, how it's affecting the game itself, what they think Battlestate's trying to accomplish, and we're just trying to talk to a bunch of people, and it was really fun to hang out and see what people thought. So, again, I've talked a lot about when we're recording this because it's hot today. Like, if you were on Reddit, and I'm sure the rest of this week, like, Reddit's going to be just absolutely on fire over this, and it could radically change between now and Friday when it comes out. But for us at a high level and looking at some of these, we love just digging into, like, what does this mean for the game? What does it mean for different player bases? And so, Eric, I kind of just want to talk about, like, at a high level, we've seen some ammo changes. We've seen Battlestate talk about the real money trading and battling that. And then today, the changes that I'm referring to is they modified the end of one of the chains of Prapper. So when you hit level 40 and you've maxed out your reputation with all of the traders, you turn that task in, and it used to be that you got a thick weapons case from Prapper, and they've removed that. And then there was the end of a therapist chain where you turned in 3 LEDX and 3 ophthalmoscopes, and you got a thick items case, and they've changed that from a thick items case just to an items case. So on the surface, like, what'd you think about this stuff as it started rolling out?
Well, it's interesting because I think there is a number of players that have never had either last wipe, including myself. I never had a thick items case or a thick weapons case. I never bought them. So does it totally affect me in a super negative way? I'm not really sure, because this time around in this wipe, I'm playing better because I know more about the game. So I'm actually progressing farther along in a shorter amount of playtime, so I'm getting more efficient. So the odds are I'll probably hit this point in the wipe, right? So my incentive for getting there is different than it was before. And my reward when I get there is obviously different. So I would say that I perhaps didn't have the initial negative reaction that maybe people who are used to getting to that point and getting those rewards as just part of their normal progression in a Tarkov wipe had, because I have never gotten them. But I also can understand from their perspective how this was a major, major change in the way that the game reward system works. And because of that change, it definitely decreased their enjoyability of playing the game.
Yeah, that was kind of the most interesting thing, right? And I'll share my sort of perspective on it because I had a very interesting day today. Um, this morning I was lucky enough that JMac, who I referenced earlier, he was playing on Shoreline, got a crazy raid, got 2 Ledx's, put him in his Gamma, and got killed in the raid. And he had already turned in his task for his thick items case, and he messaged me and said, "Hey man, do you need these Ledx's?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually just unlocked the therapist quest a few days ago and was going to start farming up so I could get my thick items case because, as you all know, I love cases." And I liked stacking bags inside of cases, and in those bags I like stacking other cases, which is no longer a thing either. So if you're drinking something that you're able to pour out, rip my old stash. But he messaged me and said, "Hey, if you want these, you can have them. They're worth, 300K to me selling to therapist, or they're worth basically 2.5 million to you." So of course I logged in because I'm able to do that, and got those Ledx's, turned them into therapist, and was scheduled to stream about an hour and a half after that. And I was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna need like 40 extra minutes because I want to go get this task done. Otherwise, I'm going to be thinking about it all day." So I went and spent all of my money, had to sell a couple labs cards that I had been holding on to, and got the money, bought my third Ledx, bought the 3 ophthalmoscopes, turned it in, got my thick items case reward today, and then I started streaming about an hour later, and someone came in a chat and is like, "Hey man, you no longer get the thick items case from this trade." And I'm like, "Get out of here." I literally just did this. And I was like, I knew what time I did it at. And I was like, I did this today. It was less than 2 hours ago when this happened. And he's like, "I'm serious, man. Pestily's chat is going off the rails. It's all over the place." And I was like, "I'm going to need a link. Like, someone needs to send me this link." They go get it. And sure enough, there it was. So, like, I was as close as I possibly could imagine myself being from not getting this done. And the crazier part is, had I chosen to just turn in those 2 Ledx, which is what I did, and I turned in the 2 Ledx, so on my task it was 2 out of 3 Ledx, 0 out of 3 ophthalmoscopes. If I had just done that and then come back tonight before we recorded or after, I don't know that I would have checked the task, right? If it wasn't a recording night and we weren't doing research ahead of time. And I could have then gone and bought another Ledx and ophthalmoscopes and then got just an items case, and I would have been like devastated. So I'm sitting here like, there's people this wipe that are probably partway through that task. Maybe they've turned in parts of it. Maybe there's people that were approaching it or they were grinding for it or whatever. Or, me, I have half of level 39 to get before I hit level 40. And when I hit level 40, I would have just turned in that prepper task because I've already got the reputation and the spend amount for mechanic and ragman for the rep. I would have just turned it in and got a thick weapons case, which is no longer going to happen. So, like, yeah, personally, I'm bummed that I don't get the thick weapons case. But to your point, I know that I've progressed significantly further than most people playing Tarkov right now, I think. And there's also a lot of people that haven't used these items. But again, from my perspective, I'm missing out on a thick weapons case, which I was probably 2 or 3 hours on tomorrow's stream away from getting. So I lose out on that, which again, it's not going to break me. But it does bum me out because I was looking forward to it. I was grinding towards that knowing it was close. So, yeah, two two kind of really different takes on this thing.
So I wonder, how many people do you think are affected by this?
Man, I was thinking about that, and I mean, affected by it's like a weird definition, right? Like, you mean like people that are like on the task and can't do it anymore, or you just mean like how many people care about it?
Let's start with that. That's a great point. How many people do you think are on that task right now, 4 weeks in?
I mean, it's in single. I don't even know what I was going to say. It's in single digit percentage points would be my guess, and probably on the low end. Like, we've talked a lot about the 1% gamers, and it's probably less than 5%. And I think if it was 5%, that would be a crazy number.
And how many people do you think know about those rewards in the task progression system?
I think a lot. I think there's an awareness of cases in general. So I think even if you're not familiar with the exact rewards or who you get them from when, I think you're probably aware of it, or you expect that at the end of tasks you get something really good. So aware of the specific reward, I don't know. I'd say a lot. I don't know what percentage, but I think a fair amount of people are aware of that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's a good way to say it. I don't think there's a specific amount of people that say I was looking for that thick weapons case. Like they know the specific combination of things. I think you have to have done that already in a wipe, probably to know that, or you're just a player who is very knowledgeable at the game, dived in
Yeah.
and read everything you could read about it, which is cool. So, but I agree with you. I think there's people that know about it. So, I guess the big question I have for you is why do you think they made this change today without announcing it?
I think the only thing that makes sense in my mind is that something on the back end showed them that these thick cases were doing something very negative related to the RMT or cheating or something. Because I don't quite understand why they would remove a end game item. And what I mean is they're removing an end game task reward. So I just don't understand that because there's so many solutions to that in my mind. Like, well, if it was too cheap, like if it, normally it's 10 LEDXs, 10 defibrillators, and 10 ibuprofen or Vaseline. It's one of the two. So this is conceivably like a third of the cost of a normal, you know, thick items case in that particular example. So if it was too cheap, like it seems like you could have upped that task for that reward. But then you have to think about like, was the average person going to complete that task? Are they going to see it? I don't know. But I can't wrap my mind around anything other than this has to be being used in RMT. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. What about you?
I think that uh let's go down that path a little bit. So if let's say this is because they saw something really weird happening in the game, right? Some anomalous behavior that was damaging the integrity of the game in Battlestate's opinion, right? The publisher's opinion. So they said, okay, we need to make a really drastic change to the task progression reward system. So drastic that we're going to change the carrot that most of our really devoted players know about, right? And are looking forward to. So this is something that the people that are probably EOD, right? And they're probably invested a lot of time in the game and really understand the systems and they're looking forward to this. So we're going after our most loyal customers at this point. So we need to make a change that we're not going to even announce or talk to them about or even get feedback for. We're going to go after that group of people with something that directly affects them in the middle of the day and just do it. And I find it interesting too because I I think they saw something, they had to have seen something in the analytics of the game. And we've talked before about how gaming companies are really just large analytics companies. Their behavior, basically behavior recording, analyzing, and then creating tools to, take advantage of that behavior, right? To play the game.
Right.
They must have seen something really crazy for them to do this in the middle of the day. And I don't know. I mean, we talked about this, like you mentioned before, for some time with some folks in Exfil, and we've been talking about this even before then, just the two of us. And I'm at a complete loss. I do not understand why they would sacrifice this much either goodwill or even enthusiasm by what we'll call a very devoted, like if you don't like the concept of hardcore or casual based on time play, we'll just leave it at devoted player base, like people who really like the game. Like they're sacrificing so much goodwill for RMT, and if that really is the case, and of course we don't know and they'll never tell us. They might tell us, I don't know, but they haven't told us yet.
They might have to now. Because
Right.
Reddit's on fire, dude. Like, if you don't go to Reddit or you don't pay attention to Twitter, like, this thing lit the community on fire, like, in a crazy way.
But if they don't have a strategy for why they would do something like this, if this was really a knee-jerk reaction to RMT, I think a really honest conversation has to be had about what does RMT really, really affect? How much does it really change your day-to-day life in Tarkov? And if you're someone who's on the side of talking to Battlestate and saying, RMT is the end of the world, it's ruining the game at all costs, then this is what you get. You get stuff like this. You literally get knee-jerk reactions and changes like this. And I just find it interesting because I think that the people who maybe were very concerned with RMT didn't see this one coming necessarily. I think there's a chance of that. And if it does turn out, which I don't know for sure, if it does turn out that this is because of RMT, I don't know. I feel like maybe they might have, like, the cure is worse than the disease, but I don't know. I mean, we should. What do you think?
Yeah, I think RMT is one of those super interesting things, and it exists on basically any game that has tradable or farmable things. And we talked a little bit about this when Geeksay was on, but I want to give a little bit of a background on how RMT can exist, at least in the games that I've played, and I know it exists in tons of other ones. But there are sites that you can pay to get currency on that site and then use that to either trade for items between games, or hey, you're playing this game and you want to sell that for the site currency, and then you're going to go switch over here. And I'm not going to name the name of the site, but it's still around, and it's actually related to Diablo 2. It goes back that far. There's a third-party site related to Diablo 2 that has the ability to buy money on a site, and then you can trade that currency for basically currency that lasts as long as you want it to. And Diablo 2 is a seasonal game, right? So there's some interesting things that go into that. But then there's an other games forum within that. So say you're playing Diablo 2, you farm up all this stuff, and then you sell it to people for that currency on the site, and you build your fake bankroll that you paid real money for, or has a real money currency exchange. And then you want to go play World of Warcraft. You can go on that site and say, hey, I'm going to use my currency for the site, and I want to play on this server. Does anybody have a bunch of gold on that? Or I'm going to go play EVE Online. Does anybody have a bunch of, I think it's krill. I don't know what something. Or I'm going to go play, anything. A Diablo 3, I need rushing. I need a service. So RMT shows itself in many different ways. It can also show itself as a direct transaction, which is what goes on in Tarkov, where it's like, hey, I'm going to pay this amount of money for this amount of rubles. There's probably services for certain items, maybe leveling, tasking. I don't know. I haven't really dug into it that far, but that's how RMT exists. And it's been around forever, okay? So my point in saying that is that it's not new, and it's not going to go away. I truly don't believe you can kill RMT. Can you curb it a little bit? Sure. But I don't know, man. To your point, I'm not really sure that, you talked about cure and disease. I don't think RMT is a curable disease. I think it's around. I think companies have taken really interesting approaches to curing it, or at least curbing it. But even then, they didn't get rid of the third-party RMT stuff. So please don't hear me wrong. I don't do RMT. I don't really agree with it. But to circle back, I don't like pay-to-win games. I just don't. But it will exist everywhere, and I talked last episode that I know somebody, a good personal friend of mine, that does it. And it drives me insane. But he still does it. And he's still a good friend. It doesn't change anything about him. He just doesn't agree with me on this. But to your original point, I don't know how much RMT really affects me. I don't think I'm affected by it, other than if RMT is just allowed to flourish unchecked. Most of the games I've played get ridden with bots if RMT is readily available, and then they come up with cheats and other things, right? So I've seen it in Diablo 2, there was farming bots, right? In World of Warcraft, they had farming bots, but also the ability to no clip, right? They found ways to get around the code of the game so that they could basically fly through walls to hit resource nodes and be able to farm those without being killed by other players, or just to do it faster. So that's the way it's affected. So I don't know, man. I get this like kind of deep, dark feeling like, man, either RMT is nuts in Tarkov, or cheating is nuts and it allows people to RMT or something. But again, after I ran into 2 cheaters early on this wipe, and then for 3 weeks after that, I have not had another encounter. So I just don't know, man. On a daily basis, I don't think it affects me. On a weekly basis, maybe a handful of times. I'm at a loss, man. It's either a way bigger problem than my mind can comprehend in Tarkov, or there's no or. I think that's where my mind leads me.
I'm kind of in a weird spot with this too, because you talked about different MMO games that have cheating, farming bots, those kinds of things. That's a hard thing to do in Tarkov. Like a farming bot would be a hard thing to do, I think, because it has to survive, right? And it's a dynamic environment. It's not a static. Like, it works in World of Warcraft because that node spawns at the same coordinates all the time. And so, but in Tarkov, your scav, let's say you're doing as a scav bot, right? Your scav bot, and the only goal of the farmer is to get the scav out so they could sell everything on the scav. The scav spawning at random locations, and let's say they could read that data somehow, but even then, the dynamicness of Tarkov with terrain, with just another player seeing, it's like, I don't know about the botting necessarily for farming, but cheating for sure. Like there's definite cheating that happens. I don't know if I've actually encountered a cheater 100%, and I'm being honest. I've had one encounter on Shoreline that I died, and I legitimately, I wasn't salty. I just sat there for a second because I thought, I don't know how that bullet hit me. Like, I was in a position where I was covered, and I actually went into an offline raid afterwards because I went back to that spot, and I knew the angle of which the bullet was coming towards me, and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe that's the one time, like everyone says when they die, or not everyone, but you know what I mean? It's an easy thing to like go after and say it was a cheater.
Yeah.
Because you're just frustrated because you died, and everyone's felt that way. But this legitimate time, I've had one time out of all the times I've played. So I don't know. I'm not saying it's not rampant, because I believe that it does affect a lot of quality of life for players. So please hear me when I'm saying that. I just don't know, like the scope and depth of this particular problem on the RMT and the cheating side hasn't affected me to the point where I don't understand this change, but I could be a small subset, and I admit that.
Yeah, so I'll add some flavor in here, because I've watched some of the videos about Tarkov cheats, and I'm just gonna say again, we don't believe in it, we don't condone it. Not a fan. But I have run into them, and some confirmed ones and stuff that have got clips on stream, and um One point that you made about the fixed spawns and the survival thing. So I've ran into speed cheaters, okay, where you see someone and they literally can teleport or move wicked fast. Okay, I'm talking like they'll literally. There's some clips on my stream, and I'll try to find them and put them in the show notes. But where I see a guy and he's looking right at me, and then all of a sudden he's 80 yards to the left and headshots me. Right, that exists. So there's also the fixed spawn locations, right? Everyone knows there's red card spawns and LEDX spawns and stuff. So those two things combined, that LEDX is normally spawn in these 5 rooms in Shoreline, or this room on, on Interchange. And as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that, some of these dynamic in raid encounters, like you have to turn the power on and then you can go unlock this door. It may be a backwards way that also fixes some of the cheating problem. I saw you nodding. Did you have something? Because I've got something else I want to add, but I see you nodding, so I don't want to gloss over this too far.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over this point because I have a question about not the cheating, but the botting. So cheating is, I totally agree with you. I've seen videos of people flying around and zooming in, and I've seen those cheating videos. I know that exists. What I was specifically talking about was a computer player, not human controlled bot, to farm, to just create currency automatically that could be sold as RMT. Like that, I just don't know if you can do that in Tarkov because the game is too dynamic for that to happen. And I was wondering if you've
Yeah.
seen that.
No, I haven't, and I agree with you. And I think based on what we're seeing today and over the last week of changes, I think we may look 2020 hindsight at the find and raid change to be purely looking at battling RMT. I have a sneaky suspicion that that's why it was there, because maybe botting was starting to come around. And botting is believed to have occurred on the flea market with flipping items and controlling price floors and stuff like that. And the find and raid change nullifies that, right? You can't buy an item and flip it. And then there were things like you can't do that with weapons anymore. Weapons used to not have the find and raid requirement, and they took that away. So to me, that suggests bots on the flea market. But I agree with you, man. In game, I think it would be really hard to have a bot, other than if it was like running scavs on cooldown and hitting loot locations. But I just think it would die a lot. I don't think that would be a very effective, bot in terms of currency generation. I think you're right. So yeah, that's a good clarifying point. I really don't think there's a bot problem in games.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but again, it could be wrong. But as far as like botting on the flea market, I've really struggled to understand all of the downsides of that. So like for example, I'm just watching the flea market this wipe versus flea market last wipe, and things are proportionally just as expensive based on the demand of the majority of the player base, right? So, for example, right now, hideout items that are kind of in the later stage of level 1-ish and earlier stage of level 2 are all expensive because that's where the herd is of players. And I'm kind of watching prices and things kind of end up being more expensive in a way because there's less stuff there's less on the flea market to flip. And I'm really curious, and I know this is a subtopic, but you're farther along than I have. I don't really know how the find and raid, other than making it harder for this nebulous idea of botting, which we're trying to nail down, to create RMT to sell. I'm just really curious about if you think that the botting of the flea market was a huge problem that affected your daily play in Tarkov, or if you think it was not something that affected someone who made it as far as you did. Like, I'm really curious what your opinion is now.
Yeah, I guess we'll be clear. It's my opinion. I would say for me, I would last wipe, I would say that there were a number of times where I would see things and again, it's dealing with desync and who knows what, but there was a lot of weird things that happened to me on the flea market, um, where like I couldn't buy certain things. Like, a bunch of people would post some stuff cheap, and like I couldn't get any of it, and it just seemed too quick, too automatic. Um, and it was like certain items that were heavy stock, all it never really seemed to move or price fluctuate. So it just seemed like there was some artificial floors being created by, and it could have been players with tremendous amounts of money. I don't know. But yeah, I do believe there was botting. I don't know how rampant it was. From a effect on me daily, I think it was more of an annoyance, because you sort by cheapest price. And last wipe, I just got to the point where I never went after the cheapest items because I always got the error message and I didn't want to spam refresh over and over to get it. So I would go to the fifth or sixth one just so I could buy it and move on with my life. But it felt like I could never buy the cheapest items on the flea. And it wasn't all the time, but I yeah, I think it existed. I just don't know about the magnitude of it. But yeah, I do. I think it was there. From an overall effect on my gameplay, I would still say relatively minor. It was maneuverable, I would say.
See, I would agree with you. I saw the same thing, but I'm seeing the exact same thing now. I'm seeing players post things for a couple thousand rubles underneath what they normally sell for, and they're gone instantly.
I can give you a specific example of something that I tried last wipe and could not accomplish and had success in it twice this wipe already. And it's on the task that requires you to turn in a 0 to 50% durability 6B43, the class 6A armor, and a 51 to 100% durability armor. And I refreshed last wipe doing this task for 30 minutes trying to catch cheap versions of these armors popping up, and not once could I capture one. Someone would post it up, and I had a price that I wanted to catch it under, and I would refresh, and, F5, 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 click purchase, hit Y as soon as it would happen, and I couldn't get one. This wipe, I was just waiting for Fence, right? For someone to sell their beat up 6A armor to Fence, and I refreshed for 5 minutes. I missed the first one, and I did it for another 2 minutes. Second one popped up, and I got it. So, like, I don't know. That's one example in a large pool of them, but I tried for a long time to do that and catch a cheap beaten up armor last wipe, and I couldn't do it. And I saw like 7 or 8 of them go by, and it was always sold out. So I don't know. I am seeing the same thing on the cheap items though. Like it's hard to snag them for sure.
And what level is that quest?
It's not a level one. I don't think I think you could get to it really early. I mean, I did that within the last 7 days, so I would say most people probably get to it in their late 20s, early 30s tasking, if they're focused on tasking.
I wonder how many people are on that task yet, just in general. And I just wonder if it was the amount of people doing it by the time that we got there last wipe, because we started later, and now you started right away and pushed pretty hard, and so you're just there quicker, so the demand is less. I just wonder if that has something to do with it, because if a bot bought that particular piece of armor and then tried to flip it on the flea, I mean, how much are they flipping it for is the real question, right? I mean, it's
Well, in last wipe, it was whatever they wanted. This wipe, they can't.
right, and that's my point. Is how profitable is the flip? I I don't know. I am not on that task, so I have not had that particular problem, so I can't speak to that issue. I can
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
speak to buying like bolts and just light bulbs and, just early flea market things you need to build your hideout progression with. And all of that is way more expensive. And anything that's cheap, I've never been able to get. It's gone instantly. It's the exact same thing. And there's no flipping going on because it can't be flipped. And because there's no flipping, there's no glutton of supply of certain items. So everything is more expensive. So I don't know. I just don't know if the bots really made that big of a difference. So let's say there was bots flipping on the flea market, setting price floors on things. They don't seem to be much lower or higher than they are now. I it, it I just maybe we'll see in another month or two.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of items that are in heavy use, and yeah, I think we will see. I think the current flea market is a good representation of scarcity or challenge, and it's because some things are scarce but they're not super useful. So there's some of those items that are like that perfect mix of all of it, like a LEDX that's rare, it's kind of hard to get, and then it's used for some expensive upgrades in the hideout as well as expensive tasks that used to have a really good item attached. So they kind of had that connotation with them. But um, yeah, before there wasn't really anything driving it because you could flip stuff and everything that came out of raids was usable on the flea market. So I agree. I think it's going to be fun to watch and see how it goes. Um, I don't know. I've been able to buy the cheapest thing a couple times and I try it more often now. And maybe it's just a mindset, right? I'm like, oh, there's no bots. So I'm just going to refresh and buy the cheapest ones. And I'm having success in it. And maybe if I did it last wipe, it would have worked too. But um, I think it will be interesting to see how the flea market continues to progress as this wipe gets more seasoned because they're making some pretty big changes now just a month in. I think we're a month in, maybe a little more than that. But it's kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably safe to say like PvP is your thing and the flea market's my thing. And I guess from my perspective, I'm not seeing the result that I think they were going for, at least publicly on the flea market. I'm seeing things that are more expensive, and it's just making it harder for people to make currency. And I don't really think that they've stopped any, like the bot the there's this nebulous thing. Everyone blames bots for every problem in every game, right? And in this particular case, I don't really see the issue. And admittingly, I haven't done the trade that you specifically pointed out. So that definitely is a good example of one trade. But is that one trade, or are say 10 of those situations? Are 10 of those situations enough to make a wholesale change to the game like that? I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I agree. I think we could go on either side of it, and I think at the end of the day we're kind of both in a similar spot that I don't think it makes a huge difference on daily stuff, but over time maybe it adds up and there's a feeling of it. At the end of the day, I don't want there to be bots. So like I'm okay with that, them battling it to an extent, but I guess the question is when it starts really affecting play styles and you know really affecting the player base just to go after RMT or whatever it is, it's kind of like, what's the best way to make a change? And I think this was one of the most interesting questions that was brought up in our pre-show chat was, and credit to Benjamin for this in the Discord. If you've seen Benjamin, he just said, well, what's the best way for them to make a change? Some of it's been communicated for months or years over podcasts, and then they did today, they just boom, it's done. Didn't even announce it. It was just discovered. And then they came after the fact and said, well, we're allowed to do this, basically. And I think they may regret that type of response, but I guess that's the question. Like, what's the best way to make changes on game systems that are gameplay related? I don't know. What do you think?
I think the best way to make a wholesale change is at a major point of division in a game's life cycle. So, for example, like games that are DLC expansion based, if you think I have to make a big change, I'll make a change when an expansion gets released, or when a season's done, or when a wipe happens, right? I'm not sure if making a wholesale change to a system in the middle of like a cycle of playing a game where everyone kind of starts a game cycle, a season, an expansion, kind of with, okay, we agree to play by these set of rules and you agree not to really change those rules. And then we're going to play and kind of see how it goes, right?
Yeah.
When the game changes the rules in the middle, it just feels weird, man. It just feels weird. And I don't know. I mean, do they have the right or whatever to do it? Well, of course they do. It's pixels, right? They can change the game. It doesn't make it doesn't make the experience better though for the customers, for the players, right? And so I don't know. I don't think that it's in good taste long term to build a loyal following for a game to change anything that's fundamental and not merely just balancing or superficial in the middle of like an established cycle that everyone agrees is an established cycle.
Yeah, and I think you can send messages to the player base by tweaking things. Like they could have made that task if it was a huge issue that they saw on the back end. They could have temporarily made it 100 LEDXs, to say, like, this is bugged. We're working on this. We need to figure out a fix, but nobody's going to be able to turn this in. Or if you do, you really messed up. Right? That you could do things to send a message like, we've identified this as a problem in the game. We're tweaking it so that it can't be completed or whatever. But I agree with you. Just the knee-jerk changes, I'm not a big fan of them personally, but if the data warrants it, great. I think communication needs to be tied to it in some way. But you hit something to me that I'll relate back to PvP because I can't help myself. But you said, when you change things in the middle of a season and everyone kind of starts it with this kind of idea in their mind of this is what the rule set's going to be this season. I'm all about fair. Okay? I don't want equal PvP. I don't want everybody having the same gun and the same skills and all of that, but I want it to be fair. And what I mean by that is, you put your time into leveling something or getting something and it's fair, right? And if somebody kills you and they're juiced out, you know that they put the time in or they killed someone and got lucky. There's this understanding that that person probably did something unique or put the time in to be able to do that, and you just sort of accept it when everything is fair or relatively fair. But I'll paint this picture right now. Today, I got so lucky when I turned this in that by nothing other than the fact that I turned this task in before they made this change, I now have a find and raid THICC items case in my inventory that I can sell anytime I want this wipe. If I sell it right now, it's 20 plus million. And my guess is with this change, if it sticks, is that it will only go up from there because every find and raid THICC items case, which there will not be any more produced in the game, right? If you have one, you can sell your one. There's no more that can be sold because they don't drop in raids, and the traded ones are only available through traders. So I have a probably appreciating item, which is rare in Tarkov. As wipes go on, typically items go down, that I can sell for a massive currency influx whenever I want. And that's not fair to other people that would have or get to this progression point. I think in the context I'm talking about, it doesn't matter if you weren't going to get there, but there's a significant chunk of the player base that at some point will have gotten to the point where they could have done this task, could have gotten this item, and now I have an unfair currency advantage because I'm lucky enough to get it done.
Yeah, and it not only feels bad to the person who is, missed out on it, but it cheapens the reward, like for you too. So if you really are interested in a quality of opportunity game, something like this is almost makes you feel like you're cheating. And we talked about before, neither one of us like pay to win games. And so just for the record for everybody, I'll go on record saying too, I don't like pay to win games. It's my biggest beef against most mobile games. They're all pay to win because they're just cash generators, and I don't think that's fun, right? Because I like to get better at a game and then get to the point where I can win based upon my knowledge or skill or whatever. So
Right.
all that being said, this change just feels so weird because I'm going to go back to what you said about they could have made the task 100 LEDXs. Now, if you think about that, you're right. They could have done that. But if they would have done that, and let's say it was 100 LEDXs for like 2 months because they were trying to figure out what to do, they would have the same problem because there would have been some people like you who had already done it, and it would have made other people not able to progress past that point. They would have stopped everybody's kappa progression at that point. And I think that the best way that they could have handled this, honestly, is to devalue the item versus try to monkey with how the item is either acquired or whatever. The best way they could have handled this is to remove it from the game, in my opinion. Devalue the item. So you either remove it from the game because there's already a regular items case, right? A non-THICC version of it. So if it you can devalue it several ways, but they could have just said, "Hey guys, this item is broken. We don't know how to fix it this wipe. And if you've already completed this quest with therapist, we're refunding you a straight 9 million rubles. It'll be, you'll get it in the mail from Uncle Prapper, and that's it." And I think if they would have done that, I think that would have felt a lot better because it wouldn't have offended me looking up the hill to that quest being done. I would have just said, okay, cool. I mean, the guys that did it, yes, that's awesome that you made it that far, but you didn't get penalized because you got a refund for the, for the things that you used to get it. But at the same
But the
time,
caseception.
I get it, but yeah, and I understand, but it is a situation where you have to find a way if you're going to remove a powerful item from the game, and this is arguably a very powerful item, right? Because it not only does it allow you to do caseception or whatever at EOD levels, but if you're a standard player, this potentially takes revenue away from Battle State because they can expand their hideouts, right?
It's 15 slots that generates 196 slots. It is powerful. In a game of space management, it is the most powerful item in the inventory game, no question about it.
Correct. And so just manipulating the situation like this is possibly the worst of all options for implementation, and we'll see what the outcome is, but it feels like if they could have made this choice, man, they picked a weird one, just a weird way to go about this.
Yeah, it all points back to what I believe is an RMT focused decision. I think I'm open to other options out there, but I'll come back to like you make a good point. Even if they'd made it 200 LEDXs while they were trying to fix it, that's still a change in the middle of the wipe. And I just don't think you take a carrot or an OP item and change it in the middle of a wipe. Not when your game is seasonal right now. It just doesn't make sense to punish the people that already have it, or the people that were working towards it, or let the people that don't know about it know about it. That's the part that just blows my mind, is that you made the point that how many people even are aware of it or are even going to get to it? AKA they don't have a reason to care right now. Why did you just tell the entire player base about this? Like, there's a big problem going on, guys, and it's like I'm not going to get super negative on it. I'm just not, because something's going on. There's a why here, and I hope we learn about it. But something was going on with these items. These cases had to be being used in weird ways, or something's up with them. And that's it. I mean, I just believe that's really the only way. Is they killed the task version of them because they're find and raid, which makes them sellable. And it's the only thing I can point to as why you would do that. And maybe it's people were buying rubles with RMT. They're doing RMT for rubles, and these were the items they were buying like every single time. Like they can trace all those transactions or something. I don't know. It's a total speculation thing. But at the end of the day, now the entire player base is mobilized on an issue that most of them didn't know about. Very few people had already, probably. And now everyone's mad about it. And where do you go from here?
Yeah, and they could have left it in the game and just made none of them find and raid. And just made it so your task reward was what it was, and if you wanted to do the trade to get one, then you could do it.
Yeah.
And just make it not tradable. I mean, other games have dealt with item stuff like this by making them, when Warcraft, we'll go back to that because it's the biggest MMO, they got soulbound items. You can't trade those. You can only trade bind and equip stuff. And so I think that, man, this seems like such a reaction. So I'm just going to go back to the why. We don't know the why. And I think that it's probably going to come out because stuff like this always does eventually. Either developers leak a reason, or in some kind of a podcast, they'll leak a reason, or talking with like Pestily or something, right? Nikita will say eventually, at some Zero Dark 30 where he's drunk and talking to Pestily, he'll say something like, oh, we turned that off because of this reason, and it was because of the cheaters, and then we can all be confirmed. But I guess my point is, like, we just don't know. And it's hard to understand the rationale behind it when we have no idea what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And we can speculate about RMT, but again, when you start to break down RMT, and if you're really honest with yourself, it may not make sense, right?
Yeah, and I always try to like turn it back to my playstyle, my game, and then looking at the casual to the 1%ers and wondering, does this change move the gray line towards either of those camps? And on the cases, the answer is probably not. Does it change playstyles? Maybe a little bit. The person who's good at farming stuff, well, they can still farm stuff, and they can probably end up trading for thick cases through those methods. The person who likes to PvP or grind tasks and Kappa, this may be the only one that they get, and it just got removed, so that's kind of a bummer. But I don't know. I don't think it's a gross change on playstyle, but so I don't think it's moving that gray line towards one or the other. Is it in sort of a side benefit to the people that already have it? Yes, absolutely. I have a 196 slot item that takes up 15 spaces in my inventory. Compared to a standard player that doesn't have that, big advantage, right? I can keep a lot more stuff in that, and believe me, I will. But it sort of cheapens it for me, Like, I don't feel good about having it now because a lot of people now can't get it by doing it, and it was just a neat carrot. So there's that piece. But then there's just a bunch of changes right now, and I'm going to encourage everyone to think on some of these things and why the changes in the middle of the wipe, and there's always new barters being added, and I think they've done that in previous wipes too. But now we're seeing things like high tier ammo not being purchasable from vendors and only being find and raid only. There's just some really interesting changes being made that also aren't related to barters and task changes. And so I think it's going to be a good time to pay attention to the gray line and who's being listened to. right? Because I think we'd probably all agree, and again, maybe stuff happens in the few days in between us recording and this coming out, but I think we'd all agree initially when this news hits that it doesn't feel like Battlestate was listening to anybody with these task changes. And then there's other changes that, like the ammo and stuff, we've heard that from some of the vocal streamers and content creators. And some of that's starting to take place. So it's a really interesting time 4 or 5 weeks into a wipe for a lot of this stuff to be taking place. So I'm I'll tell you what, man, I had a lot of fun playing the game this morning, and I'm looking forward to playing tomorrow. It's not affecting me on that, but it does have me questioning, like, what's going on? Like, why? Well, this just doesn't make sense to me as a player. And when I try to put if I was Battlestate, why would I be doing this? It's RMT is what signs point to, but I don't know, man. I think this may have been a big enough change that got so many people upset that they may actually have to start giving us some real answers and not just, oh yeah, we did it because of this. I don't know that that's going to fly in this scenario.
Well, I know that I'm going to play tomorrow as well and have a great time. So it's not that neither one of us are super negative about the game. I agree with you. I don't know how this change is going to go over. I do think that large changes like this in any situation are going to be things that Battlestate's going to have to learn how to manage maybe a little bit differently. I'll stop short of saying better, but I'll just say differently, because I do think that you can make large changes to the game, perhaps in different ways, which will be more acceptable to the players and maybe not affect the overall game as massively. And if I could, if I had only one negative to say, it would have been nice to have some communication around it, just to understand it. It's not so much the change as much as just having some communication.
That's it. And I think the biggest challenge for me is that I'm not super salty about it. I kind of wanted to dig into it like we did because it's fascinating. But they've proven the ability to communicate on big changes and what they're thinking and why and what's coming down the road. So this feels weird. That's where I'm sitting. It's weird. It doesn't feel right because they're so communicative on stuff, and that they set an expectation of that. So they're kind of going to have to deal with the fallout from not doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, it's going to be interesting just to sit back and kind of watch how this goes. So I think one of the interesting things that we also want to talk about tonight is how we've kind of changed a little bit with our single fire versus auto guns. Now, a couple episodes ago, and I know everyone's at least done this once, whether you're going to admit it or not, you've been in a scenario where you've got the perfect angle, the perfect everything. You're ready to go. You pop out, you fire, click once, and you're dead. And you're like, come on, man. And it's because you forgot to go full auto. I personally did this with some friends playing Tarkov. And so I find it kind of interesting, Trigger, because you've been playing a lot of single fire lately.
Yeah, so we didn't know if we are going to have time to talk about it or not, but we were talking before the show, and I was wanting to talk about it because I keep getting called out on stream. And people are like, "Why are you using the Vepr? Why are you using the the THICC, the what's the other one that I've been using all the time? Just like the AKMs and just all these items, and I've been moving into single fire, or I'm using single fire only guns, and even on factory, even in close quarters. And part of it was a little bit of a test, and it came when they reduced the recoil on the 7.62x39 guns. I really dug into the Vepr, specifically the 7.62x39 version of it, and I just sort of stuck with it. And I've been finding that I use less ammo. I have to take less ammo into raid. I don't have to put a mag plus a stack of ammo in my gamma. I just take a stack of ammo, which is freeing up 2 spaces in my gamma. So for me at first, it was, I was farming some scavs on factory, and I kept losing an item or two that could have been useful to me, even if it was not found in raid. And so I was like, how can I get around this? And part of it came from I didn't have everything unlocked, so I couldn't build the guns the way I wanted to. And so I started saying, okay, what could work? And I started messing with the SA-58s and the Vepers, and I've found tremendous success with it. And the truth is, you can fire those suckers really quick in close quarters if you need to. But I've just been having a tremendous amount of success on single fire, and I've been pretty much single fire only for this entire wipe.
Do you find that you have more control over the gun with single fire?
Depends on the scenario. Um, in engagements that aren't close quarters but sort of short, where you would normally like spray and sort of like get to cover, or you're just kind of like unloading there, I'm noticing a little bit of lack of control. But where I'm finding most of my success is really close quarters combat. Single fire has been great because I don't like spray 50 bullets and then I have 10 left when I finally get the right angle. But furthermore, it's the mid range. And I've really like got into this groove on woods and shoreline, and I learned it on factory actually, and it was holding the hut spawn, and I've been catching people rotating off of the metal where you have to plant the delivery from the past, or no, yeah, when they're moving off of the metal platform towards gate 3, and I've been single tapping and catching people rotating across. And what I realized was when I was spraying, your first couple bullets, no matter what the recoil is, tend to come up and then come back down. So if you spray at someone, if you don't hit the first bullet, your next 5, 6, 7 shots are way above their head until it levels out. So if you're trying to hit tight angles, I've been finding that I get 3 or 4 attempts of legitimate shots to headshot them as they rotate. Whereas when I was spraying, I was getting 1, maybe 2 shots, but it still was about recoil control. This is more about pinpoint accuracy. So the mid-range for me, fighting on woods, fighting on shoreline, fighting further on factory, I've gotten deadly with, and it's caused me to stick on it basically all the time.
Do you think that you're more effective with different types of scopes using single fire? Like, have you found the scopes to be better this way?
Yeah, so I barely use the Valde, the 1 times by 6 times, so the dual zoom scope. Last wipe, I never used it. Just a handful of times, just never could really get behind it. But this wipe, I have fallen in love with the Valde, and I also just really like the P1X42, the Weaver sight, the reflex sight. And I use that for my red dot if I'm just going to use a red dot, and I use the Valde. And the reason I do that is because they restrict very little view, and I don't know. I've really been enjoying the zoomed in Valde scope, but most of the time I'm using the 1x zoom on the Valde, and I single tap with it at very long ranges sometimes without zooming in, just because I'm used to the ergonomics of it and the turn ratios for how my mouse moves.
So I've got a question for you. What's your FOV set to in game?
59. 59.
Okay. And this is kind of a little tip from an upcoming video that we're working on for the YouTube channel. I've been really experimenting with a bunch of graphics settings. And have you noticed that if you take your field of vision really under 59, like if you were at 57 or 55, you're going to see shadowing on the scope. You're going to see like a ring of black around the scope. There's going to be this shadowing effect that happens in the scope. And if you go higher than, for example, if you go higher than 64 or 65, what you're looking at, what Tarkov does is it shrinks what's in the middle of the screen to squeeze more in so that your targets get smaller. So like the sweet spot with Tarkov is actually more like 62. But I was just wondering if you noticed that or not.
Yeah, so I haven't toyed with it after finding what the equivalent of 90 is. And in Tarkov, it's a vertical versus horizontal, which is why it's different. So if you're used to playing 90 FOV in other games, you want to move to 59. That's the direct equivalent in Tarkov, or roughly the same. And for me, that's just how I move my mouse and how I set my sensitivities up. And it's also the size of things I want on my screen. So I'm familiar with that from watching some other videos, and I know you're working on that too, so that's cool. But yeah, for me, it's 59. And I like to play on 90 FOV on every other FPS I play if it has a 90 FOV option. I never go over 90. I'll play under if it doesn't allow it.
It's kind of interesting because at 59, I got motion sickness. The sides are filling in. It's kind of like looking through a prism to me. So like I have to play it like I think mine's at 64.
Interesting.
And I've noticed that it's a lot easier on my eyes long term at 64. It might be the monitors, whatever the resolution, all those kinds of things. But I asked the FOV question because that in and of itself is a huge scope, like determining factor of how effective you are with scopes is where your FOV is set.
Right. Yep. That when I watched the video, and I wish I could tell you right now who it was, and we'll link it again. But it changed my whole concept because in my mind it was like max it out, get the biggest FOV possible, and that was not the way in Tarkov. And some people play max FOV, but for me, changing it from the max, which I don't remember what it is, down to 59, my mid and long range shots started connecting way more often, and that was the sweet spot for me.
Yep, with max FOV, you're shooting at such a small target. It's like for a 4x smaller.
Yeah, and if you're just hearing this concept for the first time, basically what it means is if you're max FOV and you're zoomed in at a longer range shot, you may have the opportunity to shoot at like 4 or 5 pixels. Whereas on a longer range shot on a lower FOV like 59, and there is a sweet spot for Tarkov, you want to research it. We'll get you the info, and there's some other videos out there, but we're testing it. But you'll end up having like 7 pixels to shoot at, or 8. And so that may not sound like a whole lot, but you're talking about a 50, sometimes 60% increase in the number of pixels on your screen that you can shoot and connect with a shot. That's a huge difference.
Yep. And we'll link to the horizontal and vertical FOV calculator. It's a little utility that some nerd made. That's awesome. And so, but I guess my point is that when you're looking at these scopes, right, and you're looking at doing single fire shooting, with single fire, your margin for being wrong is a lot less. And so I asked the FOV question because I think it is very important to have your FOV dialed in to be effective with scopes and single fire shooting.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of where I was going. I think the only other thing that I would add to single fire, and if you have anything else, please add it too. But one of the things I started doing was I was finding some BP 76239 in raid. So I had about 90 rounds of this, and this is in my early 30s as far as level. And I was like, man, I just don't want to blow through this in one raid. So what I was doing was taking in mostly PS ammo, but the mag that I had in my AKM or VEPA or whatever was a 30 round mag with BP in it. And then I took the rest PS ammo, and I took PS ammo to reload into. So for me, it got to the point where I didn't mind buying 30 rounds of BP. I didn't mind buying really good ammo because I was finding that I was having good success farming scavs on factory and making enough money that I could fund one mag of really good ammo and still profit 100 to 150K after healing, reloading my money, selling everything I needed, and keeping the items I needed out. I was averaging over 100K a run. So it made it really easy for me to make the decision to buy one mag worth of good ammo so that those early PMC fights I could win and get out of there. So just a final tip on single fire. If you haven't tried single firing, there will be a learning curve, but I highly recommend you try it. I've completely converted to it, and I may go back, but for now it's been working tremendously.
Yeah, I've been giving a try myself as well. I've been having a lot of fun with SKSs this wipe, and so it's been really interesting to kind of get into that. So all good stuff, all good stuff. But I think that's pretty much it for now. I mean, I'm starting to see that green bar fly across the top of my screen. I don't know about you.
It's counting down, baby.
Which means that we are seconds away from disappearing. But first of all, thank you as always for watching. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find the show on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere that you can find audio podcasts. And you can also find the talk show version of the show on youtube.com/XPMedianow, where you can watch MTB and I make the show. Remember to have a great week, and undoubtedly they'll make some changes to all the things we talked about tonight. So if you're listening to this on Friday and all of this has already been changed and you've made it this far to the hour and wherever we're at mark, thank you for making it this far. We hope you have a great rest of the week and good luck in all of your raids.
See you, everybody. Thank you.
See ya.